have 5 years experience in any one of the 6 domains. And you can get some substitution or waivers on this for certain things. For example, if you have a maximum of 1 year there of information systems experience or 1 year in financial and operations auditing experience, you can substitute that for one of the years that you need there for that 5-year total. Also, if you have a degree, this could be an associate's or bachelor's degree, and with this will can be substituted there for 1 year for the associate's or 2 years for the bachelor's degree. Also, if you're a full-time university instructor in a related field, such as computer science, accounting, auditing, IT security, you can get there a 1 year substituted for that. Now, experience for your background here must have been gained within the 10-year period preceding the application date for certification, or within 5 years from the date of initially passing the exam. What that means is you can go ahead and take the exam and not have the required experience, but you'll need to get that within 5 years to go ahead and complete the certification process. Individuals without that experience, as I said, can take the exam, but you don't get the certification until all needed experience is obtained. Submit that within that 5 years of the date of passing the exam. For individuals' experience, that's going to be subject to verification with all their employers. So one of the things I would tell you is to make sure that when you put down there your background information and your reference forms, make sure and put information on there that they can actually vet. You know, for example, if I put down there that I was lead IT administrator at NASA, and they called NASA, and NASA said, Michael Gregg, we've never heard of him, that might be a problem. So you want to make sure that whatever you put on there is something that can actually be verified, because they will verify a certain number of individuals that sit for the exam each time. Now, along with doing your background information, you'll also have to make payment of the test fee. And that's around $500, depending on when you register for the test. And with this, and once you get your application approved, you will need to agree to something could happen where our machinery, our operations cannot continue, or where we have a failure of service. And regulatory could be such items that maybe we're under regulatory standards. It could be that if we're a oil and gas refinery, that we have certain standards as far as what we can pump in the atmosphere. And if some of the equipment was to break and we're spewing toxins into the air, we'd probably be subject to huge fines or many other bad things that the company wouldn't want. And all these are different types of threats that the organization could potentially face. Now, categories of risk. And risk support and funding from senior management, because after all, these are the individuals that are going to have to pay for risk management. And one of the things you can do is you can take to them a list of assets, a list of potential threats that you found, that you can calculate out what some of these risks would cost, and then you can show management where putting controls in place can actually help save the organization money and protect critical assets. And a big piece of this that I haven't talked about much here, but needs to be discussed, is that you have to take and you have to identify all assets. So before we can ever even start to talk about doing risk management, we have to know what assets we have, because once we know what assets we have, then we can start at that point and we can actually take and we can then start to build how critical they are and what risk these assets actually face. Now, risk analysis can be assigned, as I said, on a dollar figure, or they may use non-dollar values. So for dollar figures here, we're talking about quantitative assessment. And quantitative assessment, this is where you'll hear formulas such as ALE, annualized loss expectancy, SLE, singlized loss expectancy, ARO, annualized rate of occurrence. And we'll talk about these more in future domains or areas. Or they could include non-dollar values. And when they do a non-dollar assessment here, qualitative assessment, qualitative is done by different techniques like FRAP. FRAP is Facilitated Risk Assessment Process, or they may use the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique is where they get everyone in the room to talk about this. But when everyone gets in the room to talk about this, no one can actually take at that point, and they can't take and actually say what they want to do out loud. They have to take and write it down on a piece of paper and hand it up to the front. And this is to try to avoid that groupthink type thing, because sometimes you ever notice when you're in a meeting and someone says, well, I think we should do A, B, or C. Everyone else in the room says, yes, good idea. Now let's break for lunch. So this tries to avoid that, and this Delphi technique can help really reach consensus instead of settling for compromise. Now, risk management is used to rank the threats in some order to determine what needs immediate action. And the way I try to think about this is kind of like a quadrant, something like what you see here on the screen. Because if we were to take lost their data or exposed customer information, credit card numbers, social security numbers, just a few years ago we saw that the government lost how many their social security numbers of former and current soldiers and veterans. The information was eventually recovered, but boy, at the time it was just a real mess. Integrity means that it's right and correct, and continuity means that it's available for those users that need it when they need it. Now, enterprise architecture, this is something that's actually been set up here by federal law, and it requires government agencies to set up an enterprise architecture and a structure for its governance. Now, the primary purpose of using EA is to ensure that business strategy and IT investment are aligned. This process is guided by the Federal Enterprise Architecture Reference Model, this FEA model, and it's been mandated that all federal agencies set this up and move to this model. Now, the enterprise architecture actually uses 5 models, and these, as you can see here on the screen, include performance reference model, the business reference model, and that looks at the overall goals of the business. We look at the service component, which looks at how well the IT services there are provided to the customers, and those can be internal or external. The technical reference model, and the technical reference model covers items such as encryption and those areas of security. And the data reference model, which actually looks at the types of data and information maintained. Now, strategic planning, from an information security standpoint, it relates to the long-term direction an organization wants to take in leveraging information technology for improving its business processes. Now, effective IT